I'm gonna click record first. So welcome again to tonight's program. Little quick thank you for our sponsors. This is all the different sort of sponsors that we have: New Albany, New Buffalo, St. Rose, Roberts Wesleyan, Stony Brook, Fordham, Adelphi, Syracuse University, and Damien. Tonight's program is here, Surviving and Thriving in Your Field Internship. This one already happened about last month, but these are some upcoming programs, and we have a whole spring sort of set for you as well that we'll be bringing out, and I'll post in the chat in just a minute or two the link to our student series event listing and all the upcoming sort of resources and things like that. Oh, and this is tonight's panelists. So tonight we have Deborah and Dr. Robertson Steele. Warren unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. And Deborah and Dr. Robertson Steele will be, discussing in the first about 40-45 minutes. And then we're going to transition to sort of more of a student perspective in the second half for about 6:45 to hear from Daniela, Hala, and Destiny. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and pass it off to Jacob and Laura.
Hello all, welcome and thank you for coming to our October Student Series event. My name is Jacob. I am this year's NASW New York State student intern, and I'm helping facilitate and put together a lot of the Student Series events. So it's really cool to kind of see you all here and see it all come together. And Laura is helping me as well today facilitate, and she will introduce herself in a second, one second. But today, kind of as Nell already explained, we have a two-part panel. The first really being field directors and instructors who are currently with us, and we're super grateful to have you guys. And the second part really being students and recent graduates. In each of these panels, we're going to be asking questions related to success in your field placements. And this panel is expected to last about 40 minutes. We're going to transition into our second panel at about 6:45. So we'll try to wrap up around then and leave some time for maybe open questions if you guys have any. So we do have our panelists with us today, Deborah Faria and Dr. Joyce Robertson Steele. And could you guys just, before we start off with our questions, just introduce yourselves, maybe give your title and a little bit of background experience, just so everybody knows who are the panelists today.
Please. Joyce, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
You talking, so you start.
Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Deborah from Faria, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I'm also a clinical associate professor of social work emeriti from SUNY Brockport. So I've been a social work educator for a lot of decades. And for the last 22 years, I've been at SUNY Brockport, where I administered and coordinated the MSW field education program. But I've also done BSW field education for SUNY Brockport, and before that at RIT. So part of the kinds of things, I recently retired from SUNY Brockport, and I'm still involved in social work education and in social work in a number of ways. I'm in my 9th year total of serving as on the board of accreditation for the Council on Social Work Education. It used to be called the Commission on Accreditation. And so what board members or former commissioners, what our role is setting the academic standards for all of social work education at the BSW and MSW levels. And then for established accredited programs, every 8 years, they do an accreditation self-study. And we review those and review after a site visitor has gone out to visit to see if they're in compliance with all the accreditation standards. And so I do those reviews. And then for programs that are in candidacy for accreditation, I go out and do those commission or now board site visits. So I'll be doing 2 board visits in November. I'll be going to 2 different schools to do commission visits. So, so that's one of the hats I still wear. And then the other is I serve on the National Board of Directors of NASW as vice president. And I've served over the years on a number of different positions, both in the New York State chapter as well as on the national board. So that's who I am.
And good evening, everyone. Again, I apologize for my lighting. I'm sorry. Some of my students are here. You'll know I'm stuck in a hotel again, so I apologize for the darkness. But my name is Dr. Joyce Robeson Steele. I recently graduated, defended my dissertation at Yeshiva University, where I also received my master's degree in social work 20-something years ago. I also I retired for 28 years of working with HRA, Human Resources Administration. And during my time there, about 18 years of my time there as a social worker, I became a field instructor for several different schools and students that were in the MSW programs. And I transitioned after I retired to Word Swallow University, which is Yeshiva University, as a field program coordinator. So my role there is to assign and support our MSW students as they plan and start and begin their first and second year field placement. I was also for quite a while a field advisor that would come and visit students while they were in their field placement and support them in their adaptation of understanding their role as an intern in placement. Trying to think of everything. I also am full-time faculty at Medgar Evers College in the social work department at CUNY. And I also teach as an adjunct at both Word Swallow and at Medgar Evers. I teach community organizing, trauma, interpersonal trauma, and cultural diversity. And the last thing that I started, what you made me think about, Deborah, was I'm now in the process of helping to prepare Medgar Evers for their reaccreditation. This will be their first one. So I feel like I'm going to have to be talking to you soon.
That is great. Thank you both. We are so lucky and fortunate to have you guys with us today. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Laura, and we'll kind of get into our questions.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Laura Uribe. I want to formally introduce myself. I am from the College of St. Rose. I will be today facilitating some of the questions to both our panelists. And to start off the night, I'll be asking the first question to our panelists. Number one, what are some of the requirements School of Social Work are held to regarding field internship experiences? And if you need me to repeat that, I can repeat it again.
It's fine. So a lot of students really aren't aware that there are very specific accreditation standards that relate to field education. And I reviewed standards today, even though I should know them by heart. For example, the number of required hours, there's a minimum number of hours that BSWs need to complete. And what the standards say is that it's a minimum of 400 hours. Schools of social work or social work programs can have more, but it's a minimum of 400 hours. And at the master's level, it's a minimum of 900 hours. There's also standards for who can supervise and how many years of practice experience they need post social work degree for whatever, if they have a BSW for an undergraduate program or an MSW. And what it is 2 years post social work degree practice experience that's required to be a field instructor. And that's because they need to have a certain level of their own practice experience in order to be able to supervise. And then if there's a student that a program has that doesn't have a supervisor that meets those credentials, the program has to, in their self-study, say what their policy is and how they manage that, how they provide a social work perspective to ensure the students getting everything they need. The other kinds of things is they have to have very clear policies, procedures, and they have to identify their criteria for selecting a field site, selecting a field instructor, monitoring field placements. There's a specific standard that talks about how the program supports student safety. And that standard is going to be strengthened somewhat. There are new standards, accreditation standards just passed in 2022 that will strengthen that safety standard in terms of how students really are supported by the program in terms of their safety while in field placement. I think the biggest thing that really started in 2008 is when the social work education became competency-based. And so social work placements must provide students opportunities to demonstrate those competencies, to develop and demonstrate those competencies. So for anyone in their first year of their in their MSW or their BSW placement, their senior BSW placement, there's 9 competencies, and all schools of social work has to have, they all follow the same competencies. They can have some additional ones, but they have to do those 9. And then at the MSW level, those get what CSWE calls enhanced and extended for whatever area specialty they have. So everything is competency-based. And the last thing that schools of social work need to do is they need to evaluate how students are demonstrating their competencies. And they have to have very specific kinds of ways that they do that. And one of the ways is they have to evaluate real or simulated practice. So what most social work programs do in the country is they use that last field evaluation in the spring semester, or the final field evaluation as a measure of competence of how their students are demonstrating those competencies. And they do that both at the generalist level, so it's the BSW level and the first year MSW, and again at the advanced level of the area specialty.
Thank you.
Want to add more?
You said it, Deborah. What I will add is from a practical perspective, there has to be a communication and it has to be collaboration. I often have to tell students, you just as you said, you have to have a place that is structured in a certain way and is providing a certain amount of learning capabilities. It can't just be, a friend that that's licensed and or an auntie or somebody that just wants to give you a placement. You have to have that one-on-one supervision weekly. You have to have process recordings. That's the word that nobody never wants to talk about. I thought, I hated process recordings when I was doing them. And just put in mind that I also had to handwrite my process recordings. Just be glad you have computers because we would handwrite them and turn them in to our field supervisor. They would lose them on their desk because they were directors and they had all these papers and you'd have to do it again. It was something different during that time. So now that we've transitioned from horse and buggy, you want to make sure that you have a communication. And the other thing that I wanted to say was that following those competencies is not very easy to do in field practice. And I, just bring to my students, I wanted to change actual assignment that they were doing, a midterm assignment. And I said, I'll have it to you tomorrow because I thought it was going to be so easy to do. Change it a little bit and update it so that they could have an option. When I thought about the competencies, it was very hard to change it because I had to maintain the flow and make sure that I can prove at the end of the semester that you learned the proper skills that you needed to learn to move forward. So that was something else that I had to take into consideration. So it's routine. It structures everyone so that across the board in each school, everyone should be basically learning the same thing and doing the same thing. So that benefits you in the long run.
Thank you, Dr. Joyce. All right, with that said, I'm going to lead to the second question to the panelists. Number 2, for students who who may be navigating ethical dilemmas or power dynamics in their field, what would you encourage them to consider? And if you need me to repeat it, I'm more than happy to as well.
I think it's really becoming, it's not just reading the code of ethics for a class, like for your practice class, but it's actually like, like I always took a paper copy that, and you can order them through NASW, or I know we have someone from Canada here, so your own association. But I would actually bring that to me when I was a medical social worker. I carried the code of ethics. I had it in my desk, right? Because there's all these ethical tensions that we're constantly being faced with. And so being able to just kind of just quickly look at the code of ethics, I think always served me well. I think also learning, really having a process to really kind of work through ethical tensions and ethical dilemmas is important. And now I'll put a link into something that Frederick Reamer, he does a lot of scholarship around ethics. He developed a model called the ethical problem solving model. And I'll put in the chat in a minute. I'll put some things in that I used to share with my students. Using supervision, really being able to process the tension that you're having, what's going on, what is making you uncomfortable, or what, and that can help tease out, is it a value? Are you having a challenge with your own personal values versus your professional values? Is that the tension? Is there really an unethical behavior that you're observing and you're not sure what to do with it? And then if that supervisor, your field supervisor, your field instructor, if the ethical tension you're having is with that person, it's really using your field faculty liaison. Many of you, not all of you, but many of you have field seminars. And so it's processing, it's coming prepared, it's being willing to feel like that safe space to process what's going on, and get the assistance of your professor, get the assistance and support of your peers. That's really, really important. And again, I mentioned having a framework, an ethical framework to kind of think through the tension and the conflict. I think that can be helpful. So I will post that in the chat.
Yes, I will add to what you were saying, Deborah, by saying, first of all, you're not alone. The wonderful thing about the way field placement, field practicum is structured is you have layers of people around you to support you. You want to follow the chain of command. You want to ensure, like Deborah said, that you're first definitely dealing with this in supervision. You also have your field advisor. Some people have task supervisors that may be different from your field instructors. So you have layers of people to go to. I used to always say that the code of conduct is like a place that you can always refer back to. It's like your policy and procedure that keeps you structured and grounded. And I was taught that if you're following the code of ethics, then you will be justified in advocating for yourself. So that's another wonderful thing about social work being very different from a lot of other career choices and education, because you are practicing, you are doing your, what do doctors have when they do their, after they finish school, they do, it's like what we do, but they call it
Residency.
Yes, thank you. So you're doing your residency because everything happens in real life. We can learn all of the theories, we can learn all of the different things that we find in our textbooks, but it's not until you are in real practice that real situations and scenarios come up that may be very different from anything that has happened before. So you will have that opportunity to stretch yourselves and be able to explore, how do I deal with things in real time with my supervisor? Also, I think the question asked about power, right, and positionality, and being in a space where you are already, many of you are already working, you already are in the field. So being able to humble yourself and be in a student placement is sometimes it's uncomfortable. But I like to remind people that you've came to this point where you felt that you needed this education because you realized that you want to go in the route of being a social worker. So being able to advocate for yourself is your first line of being a social worker. Being able to speak up, being able to go back and say, this is what NASW says, this is what CSWE says. And so I'm now asking you, why are we doing this or why are we doing that? It's going to be a lot of times when you're going to feel this confrontation, but when you have the facts on your side and you reach in and you talk with your supervisor, at that point you will know that you have every right to push back a little bit, not in a disrespectful way, not in a way to get yourself in trouble, but have that exercise in advocating when something is not right, even though it has been something that may be a practice or a culture at that placement for a long time. But you're there as a social worker. That's what makes you different from being a caseworker. You're a social worker and you will push and stretch and you will, try to make change. That's what we want to be, change makers.
Yeah, I think the other piece of that power dynamic is we have to recognize that in your relationship with your field instructor, they have power in the relationship because they're the ones that are filling out your evaluation, which is going to impact how you moving forward, right? And so sometimes what I think can happen is that, and let me say, and that's parallel to you also have to recognize the power that you have when you're working with clients. Something that you write could end up in front of a family court judge, right? So the power differentials, we always have to be aware of what they are. And then what I would say in terms of those power dynamics with a field instructor, one of the things that programs do is to educate field instructors that they have to be aware of that power dynamic. And so having really clear boundaries in terms of, field instructors often, they want to be friendly. They may have friends with their workmates, and yet they have power with their student in that relationship. So thinking about how much you disclose, that they're not your therapist, even though they might be really supportive people. So thinking about how you maintain those professional boundaries. And sometimes some of the ethical tensions are when the field instructor doesn't maintain those professional boundaries and you're hearing all about their divorce or you're hearing all about their personal struggles. And again, use your faculty liaison, use your field seminar, process those things so that you're managing those situations in a way that's helpful for yourself to be successful in that placement.
Thank you both. I think that was perfectly said. As for me, I definitely know that it's very challenging sometimes to have those conversations. And I don't know about others in the chat here, but these are things that can definitely happen when you're doing your field placement. Speaking on dilemmas. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to speak to Terry Becker's comment about the power dynamic, and a lot of times students in their placements realizing that they're unpaid workers and their view at that setting is that they're free workers. Those are the kind of conversations that we have when we connect and collaborate with field placement at the beginning. A lot of times there needs to be a refresher. I will admit, I'm one to say, I think that there needs to be a refresher at least once a year to remind field placement people who are organizing the field placement, the educational coordinators, I guess they will call them, at the placement, reminding them to ensure that the field instructors realize that you are there to learn. Yes, you are given a service, you're given a service, but you're not there to just push around paper. You're there to really embrace an experience. But I also tell people, well, I think when you ask the question, you go on to the next one. I think we'll touch on this issue again, Terry.
Great question, Terry. With the third question on with dilemma, it is asking, what is the most common dilemma you see students face in the field?
So, again, I was a field director for lots of years and have been a faculty liaison to a lot of students. And the thing that I found that occurred most frequently was conflicts when communication broke down. And that just led to all kinds of misunderstandings. Sometimes it would be the field instructor calling me to say, this is what's happening with a student, and I just don't know if this is going to work out. Or sometimes the student in field seminar would talk about something, but they never had that conversation with their field instructor. And the one thing that I think often some of those conflicts related to was expectations. So just sometimes not being clear about what is expected of the student as an intern, especially if it's a new experience, right? Or and if that hasn't been clarified, or you haven't kind of worked that through. And the way we work it through is with the field learning contract. And so I can't emphasize the importance of being an active participant and building your field learning contract in terms of those tasks and activities that are going to lead to competency development, and then to use it as an active plan. Just like, in practice, we do treatment plans or intervention plans, and the only good ones are ones that we use and go back and revise and update and make sure it's still current. Well, the same thing with the field learning contract. And so it helps clarify expectations. And then, so I've said enough for now. I'll let Joyce say more.
Yeah, you're like me, it's hard to stop, right? Because each question that you're asking is excellent questions, and they roll one right into the other as students will experience the field placement. I believe that one of the big concerns that I often hear is that this placement is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm not really doing clinical work here. And I think defining sometimes what clinical work is and where can you utilize it is very important. Also, I think that a lot of times I've seen students who wanted to, their desire was to receive their MSW, be licensed, and then do private one-on-one clinical work. And in placement, you don't always get to dive directly into that, especially in the foundational level, a first-year placement. So I think, as you stated, Deborah, the expectations are not always clear. People often feel, one other one is that people feel that their field instructor doesn't have enough time for them, doesn't give them enough time. And so I think that, it needs to be reiterated, and it needs to be time that is planned out, where that is some standard time that try your best not to change those hours, because field instructors do have other roles and they do have a lot that they're doing, but they have committed themselves to you. And yes, earlier I said you should be your own advocate as it relates to ethical dilemmas, but also your field advisor is your advocate also, and they, if need be, could have that conversation to ensure that you're getting your time that you're supposed to, and that you're getting your feedback that you're supposed to, as it relates to your process recordings and your skills.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Joyce.
There is a question in the chat, which I posted. So there was a question about, where do these hours come from in terms of 900 hours for an MSW, 400 hours for a BSW, and that's through the Council on Social Work Education. Every 8 years, standards get reviewed, and excuse me, every 8 years, those standards get updated. So 2015, 2022, 2008, every 8 years they get updated. And I know through the Board of Accreditation, as standards get updated, there's questions about, well, what research was done back in the day? Because these standards haven't changed for decades. What's the research that's been done? And it's more anecdotal. I don't know that there's hard research. And that's one of the things that the education arm of the Council on Social Work Education is looking at is, how do we really assess the appropriate number of hours? And so I think that's still an open question. Again, I think one of the things that we do know, though, just from our own practice wisdom and practice experiences, is that it takes time for students to develop competencies, to the point where they're ready for practice. And it's in field where students are socialized to the profession. So while it's unpaid in most cases, and I know that there is movement and there's been a little bit of a loosening of the requirements, accreditation requirements for employment-based field placements. They were always much stricter. They're a little bit looser now, but there's still standards around that. But it's the recognition of ensuring that students are able to do this work at the entry level of their degree. And it's really in field where they're demonstrating real practice. And so, and it's learning, it's learning and practicing, I know sometimes I've had students do employment-based field placements, and it was a slippery slope in terms of trying to balance that they're getting new activities and they weren't just doing their job that wasn't really stretching them. And so some of these standards have been put into place, I think, to try to protect students and make sure that their field placement has a learning focus. And, but I know there's an awful lot of pressure because it is really so hard because of the complications in life to manage working, doing a field placement, raising a family for many people. And it creates a lot of hardships, a lot of sacrifice.
Yes. Laura, let me know, should I answer this question from Terry now, or?
Yes, we can answer that question.
Okay, so Terry's asking, would it be possible to elaborate on exactly what type of work constitutes clinical hours and specialization year field? So I know that many schools, and when you get into your specialization, you might know the exact numbers, Deborah, but I will say that I often tell my students that it's not only the time that you're spending with your client one-on-one, if it's direct clinical practice. I don't know. I was thinking it was 10 hours or 12. You could correct me if I'm wrong.
So schools of social work can have their own additional requirements in addition to what the minimum standards are for the accreditation requirements. So there's some programs that have a clinical specialization that may have a specific number that they're requiring that is beyond what the standards are requiring, because they get to specify their area specialization. What the accreditation standards talk about is that field has to be in, I have to think about the language of it, but it's face-to-face, but it can be like telehealth and those kinds of things, but it needs to be direct work, with clients and constituents. So it can be macro or clinical. So it's really about what is the number, and some clinical placements will have their own requirements. So for example, we used to, in our program, when I first started, we required, it was over almost 1,200 hours to field placement. And then we brought it down to, it was 1,100 something. Then we brought it down to 1,000 something. And then because of the, and so we said, other programs can do it in the required 900, why can't we? And so I still have some placements that are clinical placements that have more hour requirement. And so instead of like 16 hours a week that we require, they say for this placement, they have to be here 20 hours. They're going to do more than the 900 hours, or, for us, it's 500 in the advanced year. they're going to do more than 500 hours. And so students know that going into it, that this is what this particular field placement has additional training opportunities. And I think it's really about helping them prepare, and so like I had one clinical placement that the way that they organized their supervision was so structured because of the level of clinical work that they were providing the student opportunities to really practice. So that one required the 20 hours a week, and the student accepted it willingly because they wanted that kind of experience. Other placements didn't require it. So sometimes it's program specific in terms of the area of specialization. Sometimes it can be field placement specific based on the clients they're working with and what they think is really important for the quality of the traineeship that they're providing.
Thank you. I'm glad to see there was some questions in the chat. Please continue to do that throughout this. With that said, I will proceed to the following question. Question 5. From your perspective, what do students struggle with most as they start their field experience? What do you recommend to students to manage this? So there's 2 questions to that, but take your time.
So
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead. It gives me time to cough.
So I think when you're some of you already are in field placements, but you're going to be also interviewing this spring for your field placement for next year, for those of you who have another field placement. I think it's when you're interviewing for field placements and when you're starting your field placement, it's really clarifying roles and responsibilities and clarifying expectations, clarifying hours. Are there specific hours that you have to be there when their team meets, for example? Does that work? Is that going to work for you? Is that a game changer in terms of being able to accept that field placement? It's again, it's really thinking that field learning contract is going to be very helpful to you. Not thinking of it as, oh, one more thing I got to do, but that it will help clarify tasks and activities. It will help you be proactive in your own learning, to know exactly what's expected of you, and kind of the game plan, the timeline for how you're going to progress, and being able to revisit that, as you have successes. I think it's also really practicing and developing good time management skills, because it's a lot to manage, and then using your support systems. Sometimes, I don't know how, it was true in my life. I know it's true in a lot of my students' lives. Without our families making sacrifices and being there for us, but us using our support systems. And then I think we also have to be very intentional about self-care, because it's the first thing that falls by the wayside when you're feeling so overwhelmed and being pulled in so many directions. So I actually built in an assignment in my field seminar on self-care, and we just spent time, every couple of weeks going back and just checking in with where everyone was in their self-care. And sometimes self-care was just taking a walk on a beautiful day like today, and just being able to see the changing the colors in the leaves, and feeling one with nature for just a few minutes. It was different for every single student, but it's important. If we're not intentional, it'll go away. We won't attend to it, and then we get burned out and frustrated and cranky.
Compassion fatigue also. Yes, I agree with you, Deborah, and I believe that as we said before, I just think that a lot of students feel that the placement is not giving them all that they expected. So I think those expectations are often high. We want to get out there, we want to work, we want to be in that field, and sometimes it takes time for you to get to the space where your field instructor feels that you're ready and prepared to start working more on your own and making decisions as to how you work with your clients. And sometimes we think we're ready, and someone who is supervising us may think that we need more time, and we have to always remind ourselves that we are working with human beings. So we want to be very cautious. We want to be very humble. We want to see ourselves, see how we're showing up, ensure that we are in a space that is protective, not only for the client, but as you said, Deborah, protective of yourself. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to take care of yourself, right? But it is something that we are definitely bringing up a lot more in the field. I also think that a lot of times students struggle with the small details of field placement, like who you're going to be working with. I have a lot of students who will come to me and say, I said yes to this placement. I didn't realize it was in that neighborhood, or I didn't realize it was that group of people. I'm not comfortable working with this group of people. I have showed students a lot of times that even the group that they may be very uncomfortable with. I've had students say, I don't want to work with older adults because, I'm afraid I'm going to lose them. I'm like, what? Older adults are outliving young adults. We can't just put labels on people, and we have to understand that respective persons, and that you'd be so surprised. I never thought that I would become a social worker that was an older adult or a gerontology social work. I never thought that. I thought that I was going to work child welfare. And I quickly went into working in home care, and that led me to work with older adults. And I loved it, and it was rewarding. So I asked people to just trust the challenge, trust the unknown, know that this is a process, and you may come out of it. You may go in it thinking that you want to do clinical. You may come out of it being an administrative social worker. There are so many different spaces that you can flourish in. You may become a community organizer or a political social worker. It is just so much to do. So you might think I'm going micro level, but you might want to be in a macro level to make the changes that will affect the micro level. So just trust it. Understand that this is practice. This is a learning experience. And that when you finish, you still have the opportunity to move forward and go wherever you want to go.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson Steele, and thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Laura, as well. And I know that we have like so many other questions that we had, that we really wanted to get for you, Deborah and Dr. Robertson Steele. But I know that we also have some really awesome student panelists as well. And really want to highlight them for the next 40 minutes or so as well. And I know that Dr. Robertson Steele is going to go to a really awesome conference in just a few minutes too. So thank you again, Deborah, and thank you, Dr. Robertson Steele.
I thank you all. Thank you for having us. I appreciate this experience. I love the field. I love helping and supporting students as they go through this process, because you do need people who understand you, who hear you, who see you, and can help you pull through this. And we look forward to you all coming to the field and being our colleagues, and and passing the baton. And then you're going to do this for somebody else. So thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. You're the next generation of our profession, and it's so exciting. It's a great profession. It really is. I guess if I had one kind of suggestion, if I may, it would be just stay open to be challenged. And especially, there's going to be times that, you're uncomfortable, and if you can just stay open to being challenged, and hopefully you have a really supportive field instructor and a faculty that you can go to and process with, and I think you'll just learn so much about yourself, whether it's a good experience, whether it's a challenging experience. It's always a learning experience, and you'll take it with you, and it'll inform your future practice. Thanks for inviting us to join you tonight. Have fun as you continue on in this process, and I'm going to sign off as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Paul. And I'm gonna pass it off to, I think, is it Jacob who's gonna be?
Yeah, hello
Great.
everybody. Welcome to the second part of our panel, led by graduate students and current recent grads. Today we have with us Ala Mbawe, Daniela Menjivar, and Destiny Bender. And I could go on to introduce each of them, but I think it's better coming from themselves. So would you guys each care to introduce yourselves for us?
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to connect with everyone today. My name is Hella Mbawi. Hella like hella cool, so hopefully I live up to the association. I'm an MSW clinical practicum student at the Counseling and Psychological Services here at Albany, and I'm so excited to be here with y'all.
I can go next, I guess. Hey guys, I'm Daniela Menjivar. I went to Stony Brook University. I got my master's last year, and I'm currently working at a nonprofit called PAST, which is the Center for Advocacy, Support, and Transformation. I'm the department head of the Client Support Department.
And hello, everybody. My name is Destiny Bender. I am a recent graduate of SUNY Albany's MSW program. I'm currently a fourth-year doctoral student in the social work program at Albany. I am serving as the admissions and recruitment coordinator, as well as the graduate assistant for the Albany School of Social Welfare.
That's awesome. Thank you all so much. And we're so excited and grateful to have you guys here. And we kind of it went a little long in the last panel. We didn't get to all of our questions. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask the first question right ahead. So question one, reflecting on your own field internship experiences, what were some of the most significant ethical dilemmas you've encountered? And I can repeat the question and I'm going to post it in the chat as well.
I had something written down for this one. So my internship last year was at two local libraries, one in Greenport and the other one was in Southold. And if anyone is familiar with the east end of Long Island, they're like very close to each other. So I think it was kind of difficult because I grew up in Southold Town. That was like one of the libraries that I was interning at was a library that I visited for like my whole life. So it was definitely weird to see people that I'd known for so long outside of, like kind of seeing them more through a different lens, I guess you could say. I think that was something that I had to find a way to navigate because people would see me in the supermarket and like wanted to have a session in the supermarket. I'm like, I'm just trying to get some tomatoes. Like, it's okay. I need to do this now. But I think that was definitely a learning experience for me to, how to set appropriate boundaries and knowing when to, assist someone and how to help someone and knowing when to step away when it becomes, maybe someone that you're really familiar with or you won't be able to help them as much as you could if maybe you didn't know them so well or there wasn't like a personal connection. So it was I think that was something kind of like difficult for me in the beginning, but something that I definitely learned to navigate. And at the organization that I'm working at now, I am also working with the same community. So I had to kind of learn. It was very helpful to have that experience in my internship because it's sort of like I was able to dip my toes into, setting good professional boundaries before starting this job.
Sorry. I love what you shared, Daniela, about kind of like the crossover and implementing boundaries. I'm a current graduate assistant for the Office of Academic Progression and Success. And in that role, I do a lot of summaries for individuals who are facing whether it's like academic dismissal or readmission applications and things like that. And I do find some crossover being in CAPS and then dealing, with students, like being able to have like access to academic records. So it's just really important for me to be mindful about the clients that I am seeing. I don't have access to anything like that. And just being able to like check in with myself about being able to help out these students with the concerns that they have, but then also being present for the GA role and the responsibilities I have for that.
And last but not least, so a lot of ethical dilemmas I found is that there was a lot of slight discrimination when I was an MSW student in my field experiences. I found that the people who were social workers didn't look like me, but the people who were clients did. And then they will also look at me like, okay, you have all the answers because they look like you. And again, this, as Daniela said, setting boundaries. Like, I don't have all the answers to every single person that looks like me in the world. I can teach you what I do know and tell you the differences and what is and what isn't discrimination, and how can you transform your mindset. But other than that, I can't save everybody. So setting boundaries was definitely one of them. Teaching individuals how to identify some type of like discriminatory practices. They had to know the difference between somebody being disrespectful and something that's being cultural. So there's a lot of things that I had to kind of renew my mind on, and help other people understand how to approach certain situations with individuals that do not look like them.
Oh, Jacob, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Oh no, you might need to connect your audio.
I can read the second question.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.
Yeah. Okay. The second question is, what strategies are you employing, or did you employ to prepare yourself for potential power imbalance in the field? I hope that made sense. And if you need me to repeat it, just let me know. I don't mind.
So I wanted to share it. So I think that it's gonna sound so cliche, but I'm like, I gotta just be me. And I think that we have this, like, you know, a lot of us have a sort of like innate ability to lead and encourage and help and do the best that we can. And I think that for me, like, I sort of learned through my internship and field work that I kind of just have to like walk into a room and own it. And, you know, whether like, you know, I just went to a forum a couple days ago and I was like super late and I didn't know anyone there. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to see. I don't know who's going to be here. And I was a little bit nervous because I knew that I was going to be late. I knew that I was going to be during a presentation and I was like so nervous about it. But I walked in, I found myself a seat, you know, I got my little goodie bag and I just didn't say anything to anyone. I just kind of pretended like I knew what I was doing. So I think that I sort of took that same approach during my internship. And I think that little by little, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing, I think that just trust that you'll learn on the way and don't let yourself, you know, be taken by that imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm new at this. I'm not good enough. You know, I haven't learned the skill yet. I think that it'll all come together at some point. So don't stress it and just do what you got to do. And if you need help, ask for help. Like, that was like my biggest thing. I would always have an open mind. I would learn from every single person, and still I'm learning from every person that I work with. And being confident that, you know, whatever skills I have are valuable and they're helpful.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. I think for me, it's just open and clear communication, not only with like my colleagues, but with my supervisor also. So I'm really grateful to have a wonderful supervisor now, where he just kind of told me right from the beginning, he's like, I'm going to see you as a colleague. I'm going to treat you as a fellow clinician. I'm going to give you pointers on stuff that I maybe would have done differently, but that doesn't mean that the way that you're doing anything is wrong. And it makes me think also, like, I love the idea about just being yourself and being just you and owning it, because on my first day of field, not only was I late because I was lost about where the building was, but walking there, I broke my heel and I spilled coffee on my new dress that I had bought for the first day of field. And if you know anything about me, I am a very happy, bubbly person. I'm very much, you know what, this happened. It's fine though. I'm going to have a good attitude about it. And you better believe that the second day, I was the first one in the office. I came in very tearful. I greeted everyone at the morning meeting. So it really is just what you make of it. And again, that open communication with your supervisor and with your colleagues about what they expect from you and what you expect from them. I expect my supervisor to be a cheerleader for me. I expect my supervisor to have my back and give me guidance and educate me in a way where I don't feel like I'm losing part of myself, and I'm just constantly looking for opportunities of growth.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. That was amazing. That also reminded me, like you guys said, being myself. I am naturally a very bold person. I walk into a room and you will know I am there. You will not go without hearing my voice at least one day. I think that helped a lot because it showed that I'm not one to sit in the corner and just let everything be received. I want to make this a relationship. We should be having conversations about our clients. So I want you to know that I want to be in the mix, in the profession, learning and engaging in it actively. So that helps the power and balance. So they know that I'm not just one to continue to just receive criticism. I let my supervisors know that as much as I can receive criticism, I would also give it as well. I would know that, okay, I want to ask questions. So you can know that this is something that I'm not comfortable with, or this is something that is not correct, or I've been in the field before I became before I had an MSW, and this is like, how can we do this differently? Asking questions, making suggestions. And I didn't really have a lot of power and balances, again, because I'm a very like open, bold person. But I did feel like something like I didn't overstep, but I had to ask, okay, what is the chain of command that I can go through? That I can make either a complaint directly, or I can make a suggestion that it won't hurt our relationship. But also know that they respect me and I respect them, and I want this to continue. So again, being really, really bold about myself, inserting myself, and make sure they know that I am there to learn and not just to be, again, a free employee, and giving criticism as I take it as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's really important to advocate for yourself, like know that it's your educational experience and you kind of have a responsibility to drive that for yourself and do what's comfortable for you. So yeah, I appreciate all of that. That's all really great. Thank you. So then, yeah, I'll move into question number 3. I'm sorry about my mic mess up. I don't really know what's going on. Maybe something with my headphones. I'm not sure. But question 3. How do you manage conflicts or disagreements within your internship while upholding your own values and ethics and managing power dynamics?
One thing that I learned from early on is that if you don't let it be known about your beliefs and your ethics, they will when the boundary is crossed, they will never need to cross it. So letting the internship supervisor, your task liaison, your supervisor know, okay, these are the things that I can do or cannot do. I'm a non-traditional student. So a lot of field supervisors will be like, oh, can you stay 10 minutes late? And my answer will be no. Not to be disrespectful, not to be rude, but I have to go pick up my son, or I have to take my son to basketball practice. So these are boundaries I need to have. If there was any disagreement, again, chain of command, who could I go to? Speaking to my field director, like, hey, this is what happened. I want to know if I'm doing right or wrong. If I'm wrong, teach me how to do it correctly. If I'm right, teach me how to communicate that so that I am not being disrespectful. I didn't have many conflicts in my field, experience, but I did talk about it with a lot of students who did, and a lot of them just said we did not know. We didn't tell them beforehand this was our belief, this was our ideas. So when they crossed that boundary, they didn't know, and then we felt hurt. So making your beliefs, making your understanding known, so that when it is crossed, there can be a conversation that can be had.
Along with making it known, such a great point. I think it's also, you also touched on being open to hear criticism, being open to hear feedback. because we are in such like a wonderful and unique field. It is so much part of the human experience. And I think it's really important to have a clear set boundaries for yourself, but then also being able to have conversations with people and being able to be like, well, I kind of want to process this with you because I do have a problem with this. Why do I necessarily have a problem with this? Is it something that I've always had a problem with? Is this something that I'm experiencing that I didn't even realize I would have a problem with it? So just having that open and clear communication.
I didn't actually have a lot of conflict at my internship, thankfully. But actually, when I started the job that I have now, there were a little bit of like just issues, I think, because I was working at that organization. I was kind of promoted all very quickly after I got my master's. So it was like super weird for people, I think. It was like, you know, just a lot of different pieces moving. And I think change is hard and, you know, scary. And I think that sort of brought up some issues that, you know, some of my coworkers maybe had that they had never expressed. And I remember this like particular, just recently, actually, a few months ago, I had a conflict with a coworker. And I remember that it was important for me to kind of sit down and think about maybe what I was doing that was contributing to that conflict, and recognizing that we're not all perfect and that even if we are primarily, or it feels like we're primarily in the right per se, that there are different sides to every story, and we just have to be open, like, you know, like Hallie was saying, like we have to be open to share and to recognize fault. And I remember this particular you know, incident. I said something to a coworker along the lines of, sometimes I feel like you think that you're the only one that's doing work. And this came up out of a lot of, you know, different things that they were saying to me. And that was sort of my response. And I didn't think about it. I just said it. And I immediately knew how that came out. I knew what it sounded like. I knew how I would feel if I'd heard that. And it was a Friday. So it was like the worst start to a weekend. I went home. I called my boss. I said, we have to meet on Monday. You know, we have to really talk about this. So my supervisor, the other department head, and I, we sat down and we discussed. And you know, I was like, I thought about this over the weekend, and I'm very sorry. I shouldn't have said that. And it was regardless of all of the other things that this person has said to me that were, like, in my eyes, so much worse and so hurtful and so mean. But that doesn't mean that what you did or what you said wasn't, you know, didn't have the same effect. So just recognizing when you're wrong and knowing when to apologize and knowing when to admit fault, and then it's not a sign of weakness, because sometimes I think we think that as like interns, or maybe as, you know, depending on where we fall in that you know, hierarchy, we feel like if we say that we're sorry, that we're sort of like admitting to something and that we'll never be able to get over, and that's not true. So
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a good opportunity for self-reflection, and that can sometimes be just really difficult, especially when it's, you know, taking for something, responsibility for something you might not be proud of, or recognizing where you may be in the wrong there. So yeah, that's really difficult. But moving on to question number 4. How do you reconcile your role, function, and purpose in your job and internship with social work values of social justice and advocacy in mind?
So I know I mentioned before, like I am a non-traditional student, meaning that I am a single mom. So I think social justice, my topic of interest, my population interest is motherhood. So I had an internship at a NICU once, and of course this full with babies and moms, which was like my dream. So understanding when it needs to be enacted on, I guess, as it sounds weird to say it, but like some moms or some clients, some clients, yeah, want the help. Some don't. Some clients want to be advocated for. Some can advocate for themselves. When do you step forward? When do you step back? When do you speak up and not insert your own beliefs on them, but allow them to have the space in the room to do it themselves? And I think there's a lot of social justice because when people think of social justice, it's like, let's go and be a warrior for everybody. But it's like, okay, what place do I play in being a social justice warrior? Do I speak up and say, okay, do you want me to speak for you? And then we can kind of role play what we're going to do. Or do you want me to speak for yourself? And again, advocating for anybody that I know needs advocating for. I work with a lot of children. They don't have a voice to speak for themselves. But I know that, okay, what I believe is what I believe. I want to make sure that we understand that what difference between what I believe and what is right. And make sure that it's clear between with everyone that I work for or work with. So again, knowing what place, sorry, my son, knowing what place it plays, there you go. Knowing what place I play and knowing what place social justice, what kind of realm of social justice I'm going to be in at that moment.
I think for me, it shows up the most like in my sessions that I have with my clients. And I always go back to the social work value of like maintaining their dignity. I had a client who had come in, it was the first time they were doing therapy, and they kind of let me know about some of their problems. And they had admitted kind of in the session, they're like, oh, like I'm kind of like embarrassed to be here. And I very respectfully like automatically shut that down. I was like, absolutely not. This is not something that like, you should be embarrassed about. If anything, I think that you're really brave to come into this space and want to be able to kind of connect with someone and kind of address maybe some of the problems or issues that you've been facing. Because at the end of the day, my role here is to make you comfortable. I want to meet you where you're at, and I want to make sure that you're getting the best care that you need, whether that's still with me or whether that's me connecting you to the right person. So I always go back to just maintaining the dignity of the client, because that's just one of the most important values to me.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's hard to, especially like if we're doing micro level work, to kind of like put ourselves and try to see like the big picture. How is this affecting, how is my like 5-minute conversation with this person or whatever, like if it's just like a session or just like guiding them through a resource or whatever, how is this affecting their life as a whole? Like, is this, I feel like it's so important to remind ourselves and just be like very kind of not so hard on ourselves. We're helping people, and know that even the smallest bit can be so big and so important for that person. And I can attest to that. Like personally, I've seen it a lot. This place that I work at, we have a client choice pantry, which really really cool to see that people get to choose like food, what they get to eat, you know what I mean? Like it's such a luxury that a lot of people have, and a lot of people that don't have that, and it's just so cool and so important. And it's I think I really saw this in motion. We had so we have a lot of different programs at my job, and different departments, and the education department holds a lot of workshops and all kinds of like fun things. Like I really wish I was like in that department, but like it's beside the point. But they were doing, I think it was some workshop. I want to say it was ESL classes. So we have our pantry that opens at 3, and the ESL classes were at 2. So there was this incentive that if people came to the ESL class, that we would give them, or they would be able to shop through our pantry 15 minutes before everybody else, right? And I remember I like heard that, and I was like, that's unfair. What about everybody else? Like what about people that are already speaking English, or people? And I remember I kind of had this conflict with my coworker, and I was like, I don't like that. They get to come in 15 minutes early. And then it was sort of like put into perspective for me, like, well, a lot of the people that are coming in here for these ESL classes are clients that, first of all, are undocumented, that, are already at a disadvantage. And just having that, like breaking that language barrier is so important for them. So what is 15 minutes in the grand scheme of things? You know, everybody is still getting served, everyone is still getting food. So it was sort of like interesting for me to see it in a different perspective, because I was looking at it from one side of helping a person, right? And one side of it, but also there's a whole other side to it. So being open-minded, and knowing that, you know, it's just a ripple effect. The things that seem so small and maybe just kind of like come naturally for us, I think really affect people and their families and their communities and their governments. So it's super important, the work that we do.
That's great. It has me also think about like what role privilege also plays. Like I am a white female identifying in a female dominated industry. And I think about like the sessions that I have with my clients and the connections that I am able to make with them. And I think that's also something that's like really important that you kind of touched on, like being able to like reflect on yourself and maybe think about what kind of identities you're bringing into the different positions that you have and things like that.
Yeah, and that's all super true and important. And I think in regards to role, purpose, and function, it's really easy for us to get tied down into the work, and it's a lot of difficult work sometimes. And I know at least at my placement in my job, I had kind of really missed the little things and the little wins. And so in supervision, I was really feeling down and like I wasn't having that much success with clients. And my supervisor really just encouraged me and my boss and just said, focus on the little wins every day. And that's really been important. And for me going forward, at least, that's been super beneficial in my attitude and how I'm working with clients and how I approach every day. So yeah, thank you all for that. This next question, I'm very interested in your responses because I've had a lot of differing kind of expectations. So question number 5, what expectations do you have or did you have regarding supervision, and what are some strategies you found helpful for communicating effectively with your supervisors regarding your needs and concerns?
I believe for me, because I am like at CAPS, like a college counseling center, I really wanted a supervisor who was going to have my back, someone who was going to give me opportunities for growth and really like challenge me to kind of like think outside the box and do things like that. And I'm so grateful that that's kind of been my experience right now. And it's also been really great because not only am I being like challenged a certain way, but when I do get feedback about, you know, some of the sessions that I've had or even the notes that I've had, when he does make suggestions, he doesn't call it like, oh, here's something that you have a weakness in. He's like, oh, this is a growth edge. Like, this is something that you could work on. This is something, oh, I would have done this session differently, but I understand why you did it this way. Because I think it's also, not only am I trying to like find my own style in my sessions and develop my own, you know, like way that I do things, I kind of want that in a supervisor to be able to guide me up and, you know, do things like that. And I think, again, I feel like such a cop out because I keep saying communication, but it really is like the most important thing. Like I have a supervisor who has an open door policy, like all the colleagues that I work with, they do have an open door policy, but he's made it clear. He's like, even if my door is closed, he's like, shoot me an email, send me a text. He's like, my door is always open for you. I'm setting, you know, that standard. I want to be able to be available for you. And I want to be your cheerleader. And I want to be able to be someone who's going to like bring you up, you know? And I think it's also, if you guys have ever heard like defending in public and like correcting in private, where thankfully I haven't done anything that's like needed to be like defended in public, but it's been nice to have that from him to be like, if I hear anything, he's like, don't worry, I haven't heard anything. But he's like, if I do, he's like, I have your back, but I am, you know, comfortable enough to like bring it up with you in supervision. Cause he's like, it's something that's worth, you know, talking about.
I think that that's so important. And that's also what my supervisor, my internship did, and my supervisor currently does. Literally, my supervisor has no door. Like it's like an opening. Like you just walk in and there's literally like no hinges. But I think it's the best, the best feeling to have a supervisor that is just, welcoming and friendly and willing to help you and guide you. And you don't feel like it's already hard enough to have a conversation with someone that is in charge of you and tell them that you did something wrong. So it's so important to have, that be like as comfortable as it could possibly be. I think something for me, and I had to learn this because I was like, am I being like naggy? And I think it's just like reminding yourself everybody's busy and there's so much on all of our plates. And I think like I used to take it sort of personal, like, oh my gosh, they didn't do what I asked them to do, so they like hate me or like whatever. Like that's like really like far out there. But thinking like, oh, okay, my thing is not as important to them because it's just kind of breaking that down and seeing it more as like they have a lot on their plate, and a reminder doesn't hurt. Hey, like, I noticed that we had talked about doing this assignment a couple weeks ago. I sent you a draft. I was wondering if you took a look at it, and just not feeling like you're nagging somebody. You're just doing your job. You're doing what you're being asked to do, and following through. And when you're finished with a task, ask for new task if no new task is given to you. My internship was very kind of like chill like that, which is hard because I need tasks. I need to have like an order. This is my to-do list today. This is what I'm going to be working on. So it's hard to sort of like navigate that different style of leadership. And that's just what it is. It's, there's all different kinds of ways that people lead and ways that people, function. So just learning how to make it so that it works for you and your style of learning and your style and your work ethic is super important.
I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon and say yes, communication was definitely the most important thing. I approach all internship with the warning label saying I ask a lot of questions, because if I don't ask questions, I don't know your expectations of me sometimes. I don't know my roles. I don't know my responsibilities. I don't know what you require of me. So I will ask 700 questions. And usually after the third question, you're just like, let me give her our full attention, because if I don't give her my full attention, she's going to keep on asking questions. And usually that's how it works. And usually I want to know like what you expect of me. I want to know that the work that I'm doing is beneficial to you and I'm not doing incorrectly or doing a disservice to you. So my questions are usually so we can have something open. I mean, I feel comfortable enough to ask you 700 questions and you feel comfortable to give me 700 answers, so that I know the direction I'm going in is the right direction. And sometimes I really want to establish that ground level of like understanding, because I just feel like if we understand the basic things and we build upon it, eventually I ask less questions, and then I turn from being a follower to like almost a leader in that office. I can come in, get my work done, and you'd be like, oh, did you get everything done? I'm like, yep, everything is all set, because I've asked that question and kind of like have that basis foundation of I need to establish understanding. I need to establish roles and responsibilities beforehand. So yes, effective communication. Again, open door. Some of my supervisors, we were in the same office, so it's kind of like we have air between us. So like you can't really escape my questions. And if my supervisor ever did have a door, I would look at there always, can you share your schedule with me? So that I know I can come in at this time when you don't have a meeting and not interrupt you and have that 5-minute time, or can we have a set time every single week where we check in with each other? So I know, okay, if I have anything, I can save it to that week or save it to that day and ask you all those questions. So yeah, communication definitely is one of the most important things.
I just want to say that I really resonated with all of you, with what you guys said, because I'm in my senior field placement right now. And I definitely agree that we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to try to complete everything or like have that, and like communication's a big thing, but also like setting in stone of like what you have to do like when you get there is so important, because I'm big on that. I'm very organized. So I feel like if something's not organized, I'm not organized. And then I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I just wanted to say like I really appreciate the conversation you all three had with this. Thank you.
It's also great to
And
find what communication styles work, you know, it's great to be like my supervisor is like, you can email me, you can text me, you can walk up to my door. And especially depending on like the problem that you do, like want to talk about your supervisor, or even like the thing that you want to process with them, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, figuring out like what works best. Like I'm just going to do like a quick journaling, you know, for myself, or I'm going to put like a post-it note that shows that this is something that we need to go communicate about, just ways to like build and strengthen your communication skills.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we probably have time for like one more question. So I think
I don't mind asking the last question. That's okay, Jacob. So question number 6, what advice do you have for current social work students on how to actively address proper dynamics and ethical dilemmas in their field placements? We kind of mentioned this in the last discussion, but I think it's really important from student, recent grad perspectives and just student perspectives. So
one of my favorite like pieces of advice that I've like followed since like a job that I got forever ago was be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Never put yourself in a situation where like you're unsafe. That's different than being uncomfortable. But if you do find yourself like in a field placement or in a situation where you're like, I am not really sure that my voice is necessarily going to be heard, it's not going to be as respected as like the other like senior clinicians here, put yourself a little bit in that uncomfortable space, put yourself and remind yourself that no, what you have to say has value. People want to hear what you want to say. And if they don't want to hear what you want to say, then try to find things that they do want to hear what you want to say. Because it could be sometimes where it's like you say something and it's like, oh, I don't know if that was maybe like the best thing to say, but be comfortable with the uncomfortable, put yourself in new experiences and open yourself up.
I absolutely agree. But my advice would be for new students or current students would to be usually students we have a lot going on, and we usually have our own little box that we're in the middle of. Step outside of that box. Usually if you have a problem or ethical dilemma, you're literally looking at it from the inside of your box. Step outside of that box, find where the dilemma started, what was the root of it, what caused it, what triggered it, and then find different pathways to different solutions that you would suggest yourself. Because usually if you come to me with a problem with no solution, it's kind of like, okay, where are we going here? Come with the problem and a solution outside of your box. Take a step back out of like away from yourself and say, okay, where does this stem from? Where's the root of this issue? Where's the root of this problem? And sometimes it's gonna be a bigger root than you can handle. But if you identify it and say, okay, this is what I identified and this is how we can fix it, or this is how we can go about it. I'm all about giving solutions. Like I will never come to you with a problem without 7 different solutions to it. They may be all wrong solutions or wrong, but it was a solution nevertheless. So take a step back. And if you have a same thing about the power dynamics, if you have with your supervisor or your task manager or whatever they may be, take a step outside of yourself, outside of your own box, outside of your own mindset, and ask questions to other people. Like, what do you think the problem with this is? Or how can I fix this? Or how can I go about this? So when you take a step about this outside of yourself and then go back in your box afterwards, you kind of look at things a lot differently than you usually would.
I think I can just give general sort of advice in terms of your internship and your internship experience. This is like, I think Hella was just saying, kind of be open to anything. And I originally started social work and I was like, I wanted to do macro level work. I wanted to be involved more in government. And I didn't know what that looked like. So I did some internships with, I did one for a legislator's office. And I realized I like hated it. So, but I did it anyway, just to see like what it meant, what it really looked like, and what it really meant for me to be involved in government. Because then I sort of learned that I was more interested in working with a specific population that was maybe being affected by certain laws, and so that's that's what I was looking for. So but I don't think I would have gotten to that point if I hadn't had that like experience with that internship. I did it was like such a random. And then the other thing I would say is really trust yourself in what you want to do with your future. I had professors that were sort of trying to guide me, which is great. I think that's what they're there for. But I had one particular professor that was very kindly pushy about doing, being more involved in government. And I was like, I really appreciate it. I know where it's coming from. I think this is great and I am all for the cause, but that's just not what I want to do. It's just not in my heart. It's not, I wouldn't be fully committed. I wouldn't be fully passionate about it. So I had to trust myself, even though I got a little bit of a hard time. They're all in good, good fun. But it was a lot of like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you'd be so good. And I'm like, if I could be good at that, I can be good at the thing that I really want to do. So trust yourself and do what you want to do and don't limit yourself. There's so many different opportunities in social work. So.
Yay, thank you all. Oh my gosh, so awesome to hear each of your perspectives and thoughts. I'm gonna pass it back off, but before I pass it back off to Jacob and Laura to sort of say any other thoughts, I did want to just post in the chat. We'd love your feedback on this event. And also if you want to get involved in our student leadership committee to sort of help plan out for future events. It's that first link there. And then the second link is if you'd like to provide your feedback on your school's work on NASW New York State's anti-racism goals for schools of social work. So I'll pass it over to Jacob and Laura if you have another closing.
Yeah, thank you, Nell. And thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Destiny, Hella, and Daniela. I mean, you just great. And we really appreciate you guys we appreciate having you guys today. I don't know why that came out weird, but for all of you guys who have joined us, thank you for coming today. Please fill out the surveys. We really appreciate your feedback, as well as join the SLC if you're so inclined. If you want to participate in some advocacy and do some stuff, please join us. We'd love to have you. But that's all I have. Thank you very much for joining us. Laura, do you have anything else?
No, I just want to say thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight and letting me facilitate and getting to know you. And I hope that some of the new students here on joining us will join us too. And I'm part of it now. So I think it's a great work. And I think there's so much potential that we could do as social workers when we're united.
Awesome. That concludes our event today. We have another event, student series event, November 19th.